Strap yourself in,
because we're set up, switched on, and ready to go.
Yes, sir. Reading you loud and clear. Clear. The clock has started.
The clock has started.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast. Today we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. By sharing our collective expertise, we will show you how to harness, control, and use your own skill set to achieve ultimate success and live the life you want. And now, please welcome your host.
Welcome to this week's Smallscast podcast. This podcast is designed for small government contractors, service providers, and manufacturers as part of the government contractor ecosystem, connecting people, organizations, and resources. I'm your host, justnate, and this week we have Dennis DK. Welcome.
Thanks, Nate.
Hey, you're number 3 today.
Yeah,
It's, I like to swap things. I'm sorry.
Hello.
So, yes. Hi.
Hey, what's up? Haven't seen you much today.
I know you've
Running around.
been kind of off doing drinks with somebody.
Not yet.
Not yet? Oh, yeah, that's right. That's what's coming after this, isn't it? We're both doing that. So, okay, Dennis, we have somebody in person today. A whole new setup again. So, we have Mr. Brian Ormsby. He's the founder and CEO of Pantheon Solutions. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, what happened?
The air conditioner just shut off.
Yeah, it's a lot better.
It's like a
more better.
jet.
It was.
I thought it was me.
Yeah. You're a hot air guy. So funny enough, Brian, I was just thinking of Brian, I was writing it down because, at the end of this, I want to talk about the next aerospace networking event because people can meet you live and in person there, perhaps. It'll be like, I think, the third week of May, end of May.
Oh yeah, definitely be there.
So we met at the aerospace networking event up in Broomfield last month. Yeah, last month.
Oh, that's why I wasn't there.
You were not there? No. And big success.
I still have kids.
So we're trying to do a lot more collaboration with folks up in Denver, different organizations. So that was co-hosted by the Smalls and NDIA, the National Defense Industrial Association, the Smalls, and then Aerospace, which is a company up in Boulder. Well, now they're up in Thornton, I think. But anyways, we kind of co-hosted that event together, which was a great turnout. We're going to do that again next month. So look forward for that in your calendar in May. So welcome, Brian.
You have a date?
Yeah, thanks.
Welcome. No, we don't have a date yet. I got to follow up. That's fine.
Yeah, no, and I was talking to Advanced Space about that, trying to get on the list of people who do sponsorship because we love to join that group.
Yeah, it's good. Good group. We got, the government contractor ecosystem is huge in Colorado, and I think most people don't really realize the extent of it. And one of the reasons why we started the Smalls was because a lot of the small government contractor related companies, they don't know a lot about these events that are happening out there. The right hand doesn't talk to the left, but even though there's a lot of services and organizations out there, I don't know, there's just the information, while it's there, is not like evident. And people, like you said, well, I never heard of that event. Or like the Smalls, we have events here in the Springs, down in Pueblo. We do a little bit with the guys down in New Space, New Mexico. They do something every third Thursday. We're tied in with them. Trying to do a little bit out in Salt Lake. Try to get the ecosystem talking to each other more, at least aware of things that are going on, because there is a lot of opportunities to network, collaborate, and grow is what our motto is there.
By the way, did you see that? I didn't look at it once.
Yeah,
All up here like a rock. It only took 2.5 years. Got it down pat. I am definitely never going to be an actor.
And thank you for doing the the greatest minds. I love when that comes out and I watch people's face to see what they do. They're like, really? I'm a great mind?
No pressure or anything. But most influential.
Yes. So Brian, tell us about Pantheon Solutions. One, the name's cool, but tell us about the company. What you guys do.
Oh yeah, so we started about 3 years ago. We are a small government contract compliance company. I've worked with bigger firms and decided that I wanted to get outside of that space and try to focus on small companies. But some of the bigger firms are really geared, especially pricing wise, towards firms that have a little bit more resources. And so I wanted to focus on pre-revenue companies and revenues or companies that were going from phase 1 to phase 2, which, basically working in a virtual environment. All of the people who work for Pantheon Solutions basically work out of their offices in their home, including me, and that keeps our overhead low, which allows us to provide those services at a better cost. So that's our focus.
Well, so when you say phase 1, phase 2, you're throwing a lot of buzzwords out here. People aren't necessarily in the space, right? So the ecosystem for me and Nate runs from, you're a large government contractor to a small government contractor to service providers. So like you, someone provides a service to the infrastructure, to manufacturers, professional organizations, government officials, government organizations. That's the ecosystem. So I'm sure we have listeners in here who don't have anything to do with that as well. And so I always try to back up a bit. So you're talking about a small business innovation and research, SBIR, phase 1 and phase 2, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very prevalent environment that we deal with. But we also deal with a lot of companies that are basically subawardees of larger firms that never get into, direct contract work with the government, but they still have to be compliant because they're working indirectly for the government anyway. So we have a lot of folks like that.
So you're kind of an accounting for, is it compliance? It's I'm guessing financial compliance, right? And regulatory compliance, policies and all kind of stuff. What's your left and right?
Yeah, so if you start from the beginning, we focus initially on accounting compliance, making sure that they're, that they have the structure to manage the government's money. But then we also look at other things that kind of become ancillary of those, like purchasing systems and their bonus policies, and just making sure that their entire business acumen falls within the regulations of what is required dealing with the government.
Yeah,
The entire financial side of that.
Exactly.
That's we talked to a lot of companies, and that's probably the biggest thing out there that most people aren't aware of is when you want to become a government contractor, just all of the requirements that are really out there from a fiscal point of view, but everything else too, right? I mean, they just demand a lot of compliance.
Yeah, I mean, most people are, when they get into business, they're interested in getting their business books and things done good enough for the IRS.
Right.
Well, that is a completely different structure than, what, for example, the DOD or the DOE requires. So, we go through the process of trying to get people set up that way. And for some clients, we just train them how to do it themselves. Because if you have your own ecosystem, they just need to learn how to do it the government way. Then we provide training as well and basically stay out of their accounting system except for advisory roles.
So what's the hardest thing for companies to kind of comply with or to get fixed? What's the area that most people struggle with the most? Just curious.
I think it's the government compliance environment is a job costing environment, which requires you to calculate your rates and then apply those rates to jobs and figure out how each job is being profitable and or charged correctly to the government. So I think that's probably the biggest hurdle, because for any business, going from just standard accounting to job cost accounting is a big jump.
Mm-hmm. Is there any software out there or any tools that can help a company understand how to build their rates?
Well, there's lots of tools, and there's lots of firms that are generally focused in this market. You look at companies like Uninet or CostPoint. There are other companies that are what they call add-on softwares to QuickBooks, suite of things. You can get those kind of compliance things out there. Well, you've got
CostPoint.
You got Deltek, which is cost, right? But so there's a bunch of different things out there. It's really, I think, trying to figure out which one fits you, because it's definitely not every square peg and every
and there are different cost points for those too, right? They're all
Is there a list out there? So we're talking government contracting, right? For the most part right now, federal contracting, whatever, U.S. government. There's only a certain few that are going to be approved for DCMA accounting system, right?
Well, that's a misnomer, right? Because the government does not approve accounting programs and systems to work with them because they can't. That would be a violation of their
Because then they got
independence.
favoritism towards the company.
Exactly. So there's plenty of programs out there, and there's plenty of programs that can claim that they can get you through a DCAA audit or something of that nature, or have experience having gotten several clients through an audit. So those are the questions to ask, right? Do your system set up properly? Will it be audit worthy? I mean, I think that's a really big thing. But quite frankly, our company, we call ourselves accounting system agnostic. So whatever accounting system you bring to us, we can make compliant.
And you'll make recommendations too, if we don't have one.
Well, certainly, and if somebody's in an accounting system that doesn't really fit their business, you completely grow out. If you're Sierra Space and you're still in QuickBooks, you're in the wrong program, right?
Or your accountant's about ready to quit.
Yeah, I don't think they're using that, but yeah.
And that's exactly the thing. Is at some point you need to graduate,
Right.
and so some of the smaller programs that are more cost friendly are the right programs for you in the beginning. But at some point you will grow and need to graduate.
Are they pretty easy to graduate out of one and move to another, or is that going to be a $100,000 job for cost point to move everything out of QuickBooks into Cost Point?
Well, you mentioned $100,000 in cost point. That may be the price.
I wasn't joking, right? It's not for the smalls.
There's so some of these are super expensive. There are some programs, for example, Uninet, where brokering over into Uninet is actually not that cost prohibitive, especially if you find the right provider that can move you into that kind of program. But they all tend to be reasonably expensive. Even it's going to be a few $1,000s to take your regular QuickBooks program and make it compliant. So it's there's nothing that requires effort that's free, right? And whether it's your staff that's putting the effort, which is dragging them away from doing the research and development they should be doing, or you're paying a third-party provider to do it, one way or the other, there's a cost to the business.
Now, is that chargeable back to the government to say, hey, I had to pay for this to get my accounting system approved by you guys to do business with you, or should you just put that in your overhead as part of your G&A or something?
Well, I mean, that's how it is charged back to the government. Is what you have to do is you have to kind of look forward in what you're doing when you're dealing with the government, because when you bid a project, that project's going to start sometime in the future and it's going to end sometime even further in the future. And the rates that you bid for that project are going to be dependent on what you think your rates are going to be at that time, right? So if you know that you're going to have to upgrade your accounting system in order to deal with the government, you need to go out and get quotes and figure out how much that's going to cost so that you can bid that into the project and make sure it's in your rate structure so the government can pay for it.
So when should I? So Dennis, I'm starting my company. When do I engage you? Should it be from the very start? Most people probably don't. Like you said, they're like, we'll just use QuickBooks and we'll just manage our own stuff. And, I went online and saw a YouTube video, and they'll kind of get along. When's a good time to bring you in? It's like, like I talk to Amazon guys, they're like, well, now, right? And then you can have it set up at least so you know when to turn things on and off and that kind of stuff. So when's a good time to engage with your company? Yeah,
and I think, the third-party providers generally are all about the same, and I'd like to think that we're very equitable in how we deal with this. I like to think that the best time to engage us is immediately. And then what we do is we kind of ramp up your services as the contracts will allow you to pay for those services. So we try to be very, in tune with how much funds you actually have to spend. So in the beginning of government contracting, because the government doesn't know whether you're going to advance to the next phase or not, a lot of times you'll get an R&D proof of concept type grant in the beginning, and they're not even sure if you're going to get to the next phase. So quite frankly, the government, even though the rules are the same, they're not looking at your accounting system as hard. And they do that for two reasons. One, they don't know whether it's worth their time because you may not make it to the next level. And two, the dollar values of those initial proof of concepts are very small. So it's really not in the government's interest to spend a lot of oversight. So what we try to do is kind of tune down what you're doing in terms of compliance to the level of where the government is going to look, and make sure that we're not spending a boatload of money in the beginning. Once you get into a contract that goes over these thresholds, $750,000, $1 million, and then we need to make sure that you're fully compliant and you're following the rules. And at that point, you'll be able to get your indirect rates exactly where they are. You'll be able to negotiate that with the government and make sure that all of these ancillary things that are needed are paid for.
And do you help them establish those, like you talked about earlier, to help them establish the rates, or I mean, you're going to do end to end, right? That's what it sounds like, credit and rate.
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal is to make sure that all of the companies that do business with us, when they're doing business with the government, can remain profitable. It's in the government's best interest as well, because if you remain profitable, the government can use your products going on in the future.
Right.
If you're not profitable and you fall out because you end up going bankrupt or just can't keep it going, then the government loses that capability as well. So that is our interest, is to make sure that all of our clients are profitable, and we set them up in a system so they can bid those things and remain profitable.
And do you know, I don't honestly know, I know isn't it something like 75% of all small businesses fail? And I think that's kind of writ large,
In the
commercial,
first
right?
year.
Well, I'm curious to DoD contractors. Have you seen a number, like how many small government contractors fail? 'Cause I actually don't know a lot that fail.
I don't know.
Most of them get bought, right, that I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing, and I have no idea what the real numbers are.
Yeah.
I would like to think that we're in kind of a rose-colored glasses environment, because we're treating our clients differently. We probably lose somewhere around 10% of our clients where the technology just doesn't take them to the next level. I have never lost a client because they couldn't afford to stay in business. It's normally because either the government's not interested in the technology or their proof of concept didn't work.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, because I see a lot of statistics about businesses, but I never really thought about the government.
I've always been very interested in finding out those equations, right?
Yeah.
I think we've talked with our boss once about it, just finding out how do you. It's got to be a standard equation to figure
The rate
out.
equation?
Rate equations.
Oh yeah, kind of is. Although he's saying that based on the contract, based on the work, there's a lot of variables.
Well, I think it also depends on what goes in overhead, right? There's something.
So you're talking about indirect rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the formulas are actually very standardized, and it's based on what the government calls a causal relationship. So, for example, we're talking about something like fringe benefits. Those have a causal relationship to actual labor, so that we calculate all the benefits and things that we're doing for our employees, and then we divide it by labor. So that rate is very simple. That ratio is very simple. After that, rate structures can get very complex. You can have a 2-rate structure, a 3-rate structure, a 10-rate structure. It's kind of crazy, because you can create rates for many, many different things.
Different each contract, maybe even.
Well, and some, not for each contract. The
No.
rate is a company-wide thing, but you can have a rate structure just for subcontract management, or just for material handling, or you can have a rate structure for, like, for example, if you have a contract where you're putting people on a military base, so your overhead on the base is different.
Yeah.
So you have an overhead rate that's specific to that location as opposed to your home location.
So what about different customers? For example, if I had a military customer and commercial, what if I do business on both? Would I want to have different rate structures?
No, absolutely not. And the government requires that you don't. So what the government wants is them to pay their fair share of what your indirect rates are. So let's say that you're doing business with, let's pick on Amazon. We already have, right?
Yep.
So we're doing business with Amazon. We've got a contract with them to provide
And the
services.
pen with it. That's
Oh, nice. Free pens. I love it. Yeah, free. But so, let's say you got a contract with Amazon, and then you have a contract with the Air Force. What the Air Force wants, and what the rules say, is that you calculate your rates for your corporation, assuming that Amazon is a certain percentage of your revenue and the Air Force is a certain percentage of your revenue. And then you apply those indirect costs by percentage to each contract, so that the Air Force is paying their fair share. So a good example would be that you've got $1 million in sales. Amazon is 900,000 and the Air Force is 100,000. Air Force wants to pay 10% of your indirect rates because they're 10% of the million. And that's how the rate structure works.
Okay.
So it is a single rate structure. It's not a separate one for Amazon than it is for the Air Force.
Is it possible then, and I don't know if we gotta get to break here, but is it possible to give discounts then to a customer? Here, a perfect example. Let's say I have a software factory, right? Let's say I'm running software, and I've got so much work I don't know what to do with. I've got an Air Force customer, a Navy customer, an Army customer, and then commercial customer. If I go to all of them and say, look, I've got too much work for what I can do, but if you're willing to let me take longer to do your job, meaning push it to the right, I'll give you a discount, 10% discount off my rate, as opposed to if you need it sooner, then I'm going to charge you more for that rate. So it levels my how to hire people, because I can't hire and fire all the time, especially for software developers, for example, or engineers, or you're trying to keep that so you're not trying to hire and fire and try not to bust on every schedule.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting situation. So if you decide, for example, well, there's kind of two different places here, but if you decide in your case that kind of discount, the government would be interested in, or would say that is okay, as long as they're not having to pay for the discount that you're giving to someone else. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Because their fair share would be the non-discounted rate.
Sure.
So that discount would basically be effectual to whoever you're giving the discount to, which would lower your profit potential on that particular contract, but you wouldn't be gaining or recouping that from a government contract, because then the government would call for it.
You wouldn't add that additional to them, but it would help you make sure you meet the government's time schedule, for example, right? If somebody else would say, I really don't need this by June, I can get it by October, I'm fine. Okay, well, we want to give you a lower rate then, because I'm not going to work on your stuff up front, and you're allowing me to work on more important things.
Yeah, I mean, there is a part of it where when you talk about your indirect rates, that you can make management decisions to lower the amount of that rate that you charge a particular client. But what the government requires there is that if you do so, that their contracts don't pick up the burden. That's really the game.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break. And
I got many more questions. This is a good conversation.
But we're gonna go over a quick break.
Money matters. Money matters.
Right. Okay, we'll be right back.
Puebloplex is located east of the Pueblo Airport Industrial Park. As a designated state authority, Puebloplex is responsible for implementing the reuse of the Pueblo Chemical Depot's 3 million square feet of buildings and over 23,000 acres of land. Implementations of the redevelopment plan include seeking companies to continue to generate economic development within southeastern Colorado. Puebloplex currently has tenants conducting manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution operations, and railcar storage and maintenance, in addition to serving numerous business and personal storage tenants. For a detailed look and updated information, visit puebloplex.com.
Welcome back to this week's Smallscast podcast. This week, we've got DK with us. Welcome back, DK.
Hey.
And we've got Brian here, founder and CEO of Pantheon Solutions. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks.
Okay, so now I'm going to stop talking.
Well, I got to say, well, this is great. I love Q&A.
Normal you.
We just have to kind of sit here and listen, although we kind of tend to talk a lot too. But changes in rates. So we get all the time so I'm a business development guy, and I get like, we're going to bid in a contract, and companies go, hey, we need you guys to lower your rates to from 10 to 7. I'm just throwing numbers out because obviously this are way up, but you know what I mean? They're like, hey, we need you to drop them. And we typically go back and we can't really quite do it like that because the company, as you mentioned, has set rates and they're approved, they're government approved rates. You can't just change them. Is that true, or how's that all work? I just want to throw that out there so my listeners can know.
So people stop asking.
Yes.
Stop asking for a 0.5 rate.
Yeah, no, lower than that almost sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a constant battle between people who, want to have a lower rate.
Yeah.
Even whether it's within your internal business that you think it makes you more competitive, or if a particular client is trying to get you to reduce the rate.
It's usually the first. It's not usually the client. It's almost always, hey, we got to go after this contract. We got to go for low.
Price to win.
And we want to, and it's so many people always want to, well, you guys, we can go lower. We want you guys to go lower. And that's just constant.
And it comes down to the same question that we started really before the break, which was about discounts, right?
Yeah.
So and I'll just throw out some silly numbers. Let's say you've got a 30% fringe rate and I'm just going to do a 2-rate structure to make it easy.
Yep.
And a 50% indirect rate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the rate that you've got approved from the government. You've got a cost-type contract. You're billing at that rate. At the end of the rate, you're going to do all the things with that, which is justify that rate actually happened. You're going to do an adjusting invoice to what the rate came up to. Let's say from 30 to 50, it went from 32 to 48. You recalculate and you send the government an adjusted bill because that's based on actual costs, right?
Right.
So now you've got a contract that comes up and your executive team says, the only way we're going to win this is if we drop our indirect rate to 25,
Yeah.
right? So now you're giving up 25% on your indirect rate.
Yep.
Well, you can. It's your choice. That is a business decision. However, that 25% that you are penalizing your company, you're not collecting from whoever you're bidding it to, as long as you don't charge it to the other contract. So now those costs that are not being recouped from that contract because you're underrating have to be removed from the rating system.
Recouped somewhere.
Well, it can't be because then it's not fair to the other contracts.
Well, you couldn't put it on a contract you're currently on contract, but you could bid the next contract higher.
Certainly.
So, but then whether you win or not, that's one thing. But
And then you get the difference between are you in a fixed price environment or a cost type environment, because regardless of what you bid a cost type contract, in the end you're going to charge exactly what your rates add up to in the end, because you're going to do a rates reconciliation. You're going to say this was what my rate is, and then you're going to redo your invoicing. But if you bid the next one higher and it's a fixed price contract, and let's say you overrated it and you ended up making 20% more than you thought you would.
Right.
That's just the way it is. Because a fixed price contract, when a fixed price contract is negotiated, that's a fair price for whatever that you said you were going to deliver. And if you lose money or make money, no one cares because the price was set up front.
Right.
that's actually not true. And I'll go back to this. There's one question I want to ask you on that one.
Yeah, I do oversimplify.
So
the
what's the bottom line is what is you could consider it, but it's actually going to affect the company. It's not just the contract by you dropping just to win. It's better to kind of just leave things, because otherwise you need to go back and look at all of your stuff, really, right? I mean, you don't want to just try to. That's what I'm trying to get to, because I get companies all the time. Well, we just need to go, drop it. And I'm like, one, I personally don't like to do that, because why? Why do we want to keep fighting to the bottom, right? That's my big gripe.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. And we're setting a precedent by doing that.
And I can't remember, it came in my head right now, but I can't remember who said it, that it said, hey, we're going to make up for our losses per widget by making more widgets.
Yeah.
That doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So the reality here is that the most important thing is to calculate your rates based on what's going on in your business, what you think your forecasts are, what your expenses are going to be. For example, if you win, is that going to change your expenses? So you know what your profit margin is. If you decide to give up some of that profit margin, that's fine. But here's the thing, if you decide to give up more than you have in profit margin, why would you take a job in a losing fashion?
Yeah. And if you win, you need to add more back end too, because you got more work to do.
One case, right. I could see one case where you would take a loss, and that's if you want to get in with a new customer.
Well, and it is possible that there are some foot in the door decisions that you make that you might lose on a contract. I don't know. I really think, when I worked with my previous company, the simulator company, we worked almost exclusively with government contracts.
Mm-hmm.
We bid all our contracts the way we saw them. We tried to make sure that our rates were exactly what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
We took basically the minimal amount of profit that you can get from the government, which is like between right around 7%ish. And that company stayed in business. I was with them on their 29th year. I left them 7 years ago. They're still hopping, right?
Yeah.
And it's because they don't lose money on contracts.
They were
right?
fair, and they
Well,
they were.
so that was the next question I wanted to ask.
All right. This is a good conversation thing.
Back in a previous life, I worked for a big wood contractor, and I used to be part of a lot of negotiations on a lot of the new programs. They would use me as an engineer, the tech guy, in negotiations. I always thought it was interesting, but at the same time, especially on a cost plus, the government would come to us and say, I can't think of the form that they like this fill out. For fair and reasonableness, they want to fill out for profit. There's some type of form that they would fill out. And I was at somewhere between 8 and like 11%. It'd be like the worst thing ever if you ever want to make more than that kind of profit. When the commercial side is making 30 to 50% profit on their stuff.
Yeah.
I don't, that's a huge difference, right? I mean, trying to.
Well, I mean,
So what was your question?
Well, and I'm going to go back to when you said.
I'm like waiting. Okay, what's the question?
If you're a firm fixed price, it shouldn't matter whether you win or if you make money or lose money. And in a true contract sense, that is 100%. But I've been part of programs.
No, he didn't say it shouldn't matter. He just says it doesn't matter because you negotiate that price up front, and you're either gonna.
I agree.
You spend more money than what it costs you.
If I hire you to build me a deck at my house, let's say we settle on $5,000. We both think that's fair, reasonable.
Yep.
It's going to take you 6 months. I handshake on 6 months. We write a contract, whatever.
Did you spit?
That $5,000, sure.
All right.
Spit at you.
All right.
I spit in your dinner direction. No, so, but I could care less as long as you meet my requirements.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could care less if you get it done in 1 month and make $4,700.
So you're saying
use extra.
your question is, should the government care if I make 50% or if I make 10% as long as I deliver the product?
Correct. What I was going to say is what I've found is if the government ever catches wind that, hey, maybe you found a better way to do something. I've had government customers get very upset, I can't believe you made 20% profit on that job. Well, why? I just manage my people better. I don't see what the problem is with that. But they get very upset because they get that mindset of, well, you shouldn't be making more than 8 or to 10% profit.
I guess
That's right.
is that true?
Well, no, there is a little bit of a play on that when it comes to the government, because there's a lot of pressure on the government side to make sure that the costs are right. So when you bid a firm fixed price contract, there's somebody on the government side that does an analysis that comes up with the should pay amount, right? And so when they get that should cost is actually the right term, and if you're off that should cost, let's say you're twice as high, and then you still negotiate and you get the money you want, and then you come in closer to the should cost, they're mad, right?
Yeah.
And
I think it's probably more
they
mad
feel
that they.
Well, but I think they feel like you pulled the wool over their eyes, right? I mean, so I think that's one of those things. And if you did that over and over and over again, I think the government would probably stop doing business with you.
Well, and you're probably going to
like any other business should do that, right?
Exactly.
So I think you try, when you go through this process, you try to be fair and reasonable, but when you're in a fixed price environment, you also have to identify risk. Because if something goes wrong that you didn't realize was going to go wrong, and then you lose your shirt, the government doesn't care now. They're not mad.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. Mad.
Not at all.
Well, they're mad because you're not delivering.
I was gonna say that's what I meant. If you don't provide the product, they're mad.
Yeah, they're mad.
So I think it's one of those things when you go through a contract, and I've been in a contract like that where they wanted me to move a simulator from one building to another, and I bid a certain percentage of what if I drop one of these $10,000 projectors and those kinds of things, and they're like, well, dropping a projector, that shouldn't happen. I'm like, it shouldn't happen, but these things do happen.
Yeah.
And
unless you're going to call that force majeure, then it'll be fine.
Yeah, and the thing is I've got technicians that are out there working, 20 feet above the ground doing a projector, and I tell them, hey, if you look like you're losing the balance, let the projector go, right? Because that's not worth it.
It's cheaper than the.
And so you have to bid those things, and then when you get through, in this case, we did move a simulator from one building to another. Everything went perfect, but I had to bid everything potentially not going perfect,
Right.
Because they wanted a firm fixed price quote.
Yep.
So we made a lot of money because we did it right and we got it right, right? But
and like you said, I like how you said, so very, very key. If you're going to bid firm fixed price, make sure you have a very, very detailed risk schedule, right? Here's about risks, because that's what they're going to take on or what you're going to take on. But we would always turn those risks around a lot of times and make additional profit on it because we're like, hey, this is something that we think we could help you guys with.
Mitigate.
mitigate
Sure.
risk or whatever, and help them on a firm fixed price. But I personally prefer firm fixed price contracts myself.
Well, they're certainly a lot easier to manage, and quite frankly, there's an opportunity to make more money than a little standard 7.5%.
Well, why is it
You have
that-
risk and you have opportunity, right?
Why is it
Both
that-
risk and opportunity?
Exactly.
Why is it that a lot of companies shy away from that? I know a lot do. They're always firm fixed price, but we won't go there.
Well, a cost type contract,
Yeah.
there is no risk. That's
Yeah.
that's why they hold your fee to 7.5%, 8%, right?
Right.
Because there is no risk. If you don't deliver on a cost type contract, what does the government say? Cost type contract in the rules says best effort under the funding provided. So if your best effort wasn't good enough, too bad for the government.
Yeah.
So I think most
Less
people are
risk.
scared of that very first firm fixed price. So let's say you're building widgets and they want to make it firm fixed price. Well, that first widget you're going to build, you're going to have R&D included. It might not go as planned, right?
Yeah.
But as you do more and more of them, so that very first one is really tough. But as long as you bind yourself with the risks and opportunities, and really, that first risk firm fixed price contract I ever did, I had probably 120 performance-based payment milestones, which at first the government was okay with. Then after about a year and a half in, they're like, "Oh, this is too many. I can't just give you $100,000 because you wrote a report or whatever." Blah, blah.
Is that when you were moving the nuclear warheads? Is that what I want to change slightly.
Well, no, just
Yeah.
before we change the subject, I also want to go on to one of the reasons people don't like the cost type contracts is because it is best effort, but the government puts a lot of pressure on you still to deliver what they want.
Right.
And then people feel like they're in this cycle where they have to, and they've got people working overtime that they're not getting paid for, and a whole bunch of other things, because now they're afraid because the government will kind of allude to, well, if you don't get this one, you're not going to get the next one.
Yeah.
So they feel a lot of pressure to deliver, but the contract law says you do your best effort, and if you didn't deliver, then they have to decide whether they're going to pony up more money for you to finish, or they're going to go a different route.
Yeah.
And it's the different route that they
terminate
use
costs or-
against you
Yeah.
to try to pressure you into giving a firm fixed price deliverable under a cost type
And
contract.
so the last thing I'll say is the reason why as a lead engineer, when I used to be the one that was operations side of things and make sure that things got completed on my firm fixed price contracts, if I had both a cost plus and a firm fixed price, the problem I would have is that if it was the same customer, they'd be like, "Hey Nate, I want you to add another computer over here." Well, cost plus, great, that's sweet. Just send my contracts officer a note real quick. We'll sign the paperwork. We're good. They hated it when I said on firm fixed price, we'd love to do that, but it's not in the contract. I would literally print my contract out. It would be part of my books that I would carry everywhere. That way I could educate my PM on the government side usually, because they were usually not the ones that were part of negotiations. So they don't know what's out there or
Right.
what you were put on contract for. So I'd be like literally carrying it with me and be like, "Hey, that's great. We'll do this for you. Here's X amount of time, X amount of dollars. We just gonna negotiate it real quick and we're good." And they're like, "What? But on this contract, I can just add scope." And I'm like, "That doesn't work that way for fixed price."
Yeah, and I think it's amazing when you talk to people who actually administer contracts. They know that if you go out and buy a $5,000 computer, they're probably going to pay $12,000 for it by the time you get through the procurement process and all the rating and everything that goes on with it, right?
Right.
But your program officer, or especially the, I was trying to think of the person that's at the base level that punches everything, and I can't remember the name now. But they have no idea that that's what it really costs for you to pull that off, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, "It's a $3,000 computer.
Program manager usually.
Why did you send me a bill for $12,000? You say, "Hey, that's just how it works, buddy."
Yeah, sorry, welcome to doing business with the government. The $400 hammer, right?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't 400. It was like 4 million.
Well, it's a specialty handle, right?
Yeah. Sure grip.
I would, to give the government their due, they are getting better at those small things, right? Now it's like less than
Yeah.
$5,000. They don't care. You don't have to track it anymore or whatever it is. But there's certain values now that you can do. But you got some more questions?
Well, I wanted to change the topic slightly. So, how did you get into this space? Like, did you say earlier that you were in the military? Is that
Yeah.
How did you find yourself here? That's
Well,
always
you know,
a
it
His car.
it is. I drove down. That's hilarious. But no, so I actually I spent time in cost and budget analysis in the Air Force, which kind of got me on the government side. And when I left the military, I thought I'd be through with that. But then because of that experience, when I went to work for the simulator company, they pushed me, basically
back
on
there.
that side. and that got me into dealing with a simulator company, now working on that side of the fence. And you're there 10 years, you learn a lot of things about contract negotiations and program management and things, and it's just kind of snowballed for me since then.
I just kind of heard that. I think you kind of briefly mentioned that. And I'm always fascinated how people get to where they are and how you started your company, why, what drove you to that.
And why Pantheon?
Yeah, we meant to go there too.
Oh, no, so Pantheon, the concept was, the Pantheon itself in Rome is to celebrate, people of higher capability, a higher standard. So we want to try to use that name to kind of hold our entire staff accountable to rise above and be just a little bit better.
Okay. That's nice.
It's a story.
It is a story. So how do people get a hold of you? Because you've got a lot of information, and this has been great, by the way. I've learned a lot. How do people get a hold of you if they want to work with you from our ecosystem? What's the best
Sure.
way?
Well, I mean, I'm at a lot of those events, so you can probably run into me, and I'm that goofy-looking guy with the funny gray beard.
Yeah, look at
But yay! But
Well, and come see me or Nate. We'll point them out to you too.
Yeah.
Because we're the other funny-looking guys.
But so they can email me at brian@pantheonco.com, or they can go to our website www.pantheonco.com. And
Co, right?
CO,
Pantheon
yeah.
CO.
It's basically pantheoncolorado.com.
Oh, Colorado.
I
But
thought it was a different company.
Yeah,
Pantheon company. Sorry.
well, maybe it's supposed to, but I took it as Colorado, so maybe I'm
That's
just
fine.
maybe the word's there.
One works, I guess.
Yeah,
Right? As long as I get there.
But they can just go to our website and hit contact us and do that, or they can email us. So we're
Well, because I know we have a lot of questions, and we're not even business owners. So I would assume, if I was a business owner, I would always have lots of questions regarding my financial status, compliance. I mean, that might be probably my number one thing that I would.
Of course, I would be that business owner that'd probably be dumb and figure out that I'm just going to go
QuickBooks.
cheap and do it myself because that's how I am, and then I'd fail. So yeah, that's why I'm not a business owner.
Until you get hit by a.
well, that's why I send all of my clients to places like the Smalls, right? I recommend to my clients to come to Smalls and stuff like that, because the big value is being able to talk to other business owners
That's right.
and share those experiences. And then, sometimes you meet providers like me that are a good fit for you, but most of the time you just meet another business owner who's been there, done that, and it's very
experience
helpful.
that you don't have yet that you wish you did.
Oh yeah. And the things they've done that were a total disaster that you can avoid because another business owner told you, hey, don't go down that road.
There's one thing to learn from your mistakes and just run the experiment, but there was another thing when that experiment cost you the company.
Well, and don't wait. The other lesson is here: don't wait. If you have questions, or you're starting to grow, or looks like you might be winning some contracts, contact guys like Pantheon to kind of help you be ready.
Yeah.
Don't wait until you win and then oh boy, what do we do?
Yeah, and you never know when it's going to take off. I mean, you might get the exact niche that makes it just go crazy. I've got a client that I'll tell you about. This time last year, they had 4 employees, and their total revenue for the year before was about $150,000. This time this year, they have 25 employees, and their revenue for January and February is $1.2 million. So you never know when it's going to take off.
Yep.
It all starts with that first conversation.
It does. Ooh, back to our book. All right. Well, hey, thank you very much for coming down today, and we will be in Broomfield, I think. Like I said, in May, the 3rd week of May. I'll confirm that and get the word out. And then in Colorado Springs, we're going to be here April 20th. We'll be at MASH Mechanics, 5 to 7 p.m. on the Wednesday, the 20th of April. And then I believe it's the 8th or 9th of June down in Pueblo.
The 8th.
8th of June.
Wednesday,
down
the
in
8th
Pueblo.
of June.
Yep.
We'll be in Pueblo at Water Tower Voice again.
And you can, we'll introduce you to Brian up there in
Well, and so
Wonderland.
next week, we're also going to be, both of us are going to be at Space Symposium,
like this
walking around.
Something.
Yeah, me too.
That's the way this probably, yeah, so hey, nice seeing you guys at the Space Symposium, because this is going up afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's go. Well, thanks a lot for coming down. We really
I
appreciate
really
it.
enjoyed the
Thank
conversation.
you.
It was great.
And we hope we get you linked up with some more folks, get some
Yes.
more business.
I appreciate it, Brian, thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Just Nate, signing off.
Thanks for listening.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Smallscast podcast. Connect with us at thesmalls.org. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter to receive our free materials. See you at the next episode.
See you at the next episode.